So I'm going to give a quick content note here. This is a rough topic to talk about abusive relationships and SH and how that can be weaponized. And I'm going to take this from a couple of different perspectives. The perspective of the person who is being coercively abused in this way and being told that this other person will do this. I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of why some of these people may be doing this. And then I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of somebody who emotionally engages in those things. If you have found that perhaps you are the person feeling like you should tell somebody that, or that that is something you've done in the past, and kind of talk about that in a compassionate way. I understand that this may not be something everybody can hear right now, so if this might trigger you or cause harm, go ahead and scroll on, no judgment whatsoever. Now, let's talk about this from the perspective of somebody who is the victim, the survivor of this kind of thing. When you are the person who has received coercive control, because that's what this is, if someone threatens you and says, I'm going to SH or self-terminate due to you bringing this up, trying to break up with me, whatever it is. You, as the person who has received that kind of coercive control, you are responsible for your safety first. Your safety mentally, emotionally, and physically. All right? If somebody is that reactive and that volatile, whether they are aware of it or not, your safety is priority here, which means you need to leave. You need to get out of that situation. Now, if you have the bandwidth and ability, you may want to seek out both mental help for yourself, mental emotional help and support for yourself, and potentially intervention for the person involved with this. Now, as somebody who has worked victims advocacy, as somebody who has seen intervention go terribly wrong, especially if that intervention involves the police, just be aware that there are mitigating factors on whether or not law enforcement should be involved in mental health things. But if it is an extreme event, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. All right? You, as the survivor, have to prioritize your safety, your needs, you in this moment. You are not responsible for somebody else's mental health crisis, regardless of whether they say you are. You are not responsible for their overreaction. You are not responsible for their leveraging of their mental health status against you. You have to prioritize your mental and emotional wellness, and then if you have the bandwidth, see if somebody could be reached out for them, but only if that is safe for you to do so, mentally, emotionally, physically. Now, let's talk about the dynamic a little bit. So when we talk about this, about how this plays out, one of the things we have to understand is that the person who is doing this may or may not be aware of what they're doing. The person may be very Machiavellian, intentionally abusive. They may know, hey, I know this person is a really kind of like soft touch. All I gotta do is play the victim. Push the victim button. Everything stops. I get all of the emotional feelies now. They take care of me. I play the victim. Look at them coming to rescue me. This happens a lot with people in power dynamics with an abuser who is the chronic victim. This can be a form of vulnerable narcissism. Now, obviously, not everybody with vulnerable narcissism is an abuser. We're going to be very clear with that. We are not stigmatizing here. But vulnerable narcissism can show up in this way of presenting manipulation through vulnerability. So they are the chronic victim, but in the sense of their ability to perceive their victimhood is disproportionate. What do I mean by that? They have a bias that always sees themselves as victim, as targeted, as the universe is against me, the people are against me, other things are against me, very kind of the world is targeted at me. And this form of self-absorption, or even to the point of a narcissistic personality disorder, can be something that tends towards abusive people. With that, we can have some people who chronically play the victim. They are constantly, the world is against them, nothing works for them, but a lot of what is happening is self-fulfilling prophecy, because they will not take risks, because their risk tolerance is nil. Their discomfort tolerance is nil. And so what happens is the slightest provocation, the slightest discomfort, the slightest conflict in the relationship can now push them into a mental health crisis. Now, some of them do this Machiavellian style. They know they're not actually as genuinely in crisis. They feel the discomfort, but they don't have to engage with it as much. They will do this more intentionally. They know that this person is a soft touch. They are intentionally harming. Now, again, if you are the person surviving this, it doesn't matter if the person is intentionally doing it or lashing out due to genuine mental health distress. You are not responsible. I'm just providing perspective here. So this person may be doing it in a Machiavellian style intentionally. They know what they're doing. They know that they can push that button. They also may be in genuine distress. They may just have such a low tolerance that everything hurts. Again, there is no way for you as the survivor of this to know the difference automatically, and it is not your responsibility to know that difference. And you cannot fix them. Even if you were the best mental health guru in the world, you would not be their mental health guru, because that close relationship with them would violate professional ability to have good standards and good care for them. You cannot save them as the person surviving them. You cannot save them by staying in relationship. You are enabling their continued controlling behavior by staying with them in that situation. So just be aware of that. This person may be in genuine distress, but that means that their tolerance is so low that this is an automatic knee-jerk lash-out response at the slightest provocation. And that is not safe for you, and it is not safe for them. And you leaving is the only thing you can do to protect yourself first as the one surviving it. Now, I will also talk about if you have found that you are the person that feels the need to do this. It generally comes from trauma. It comes from trauma. And I know for survivors, this may not be the part you want to listen to. All right, but if you need to go ahead and turn that off, go ahead and do it. But I want to talk about this because it's really important. As a survivor of complex trauma, I know how these things can go internally in your own head. I know when the slightest thing can send you off into an SH mentality spiral. I still deal with it. I am 40 years old. I have been out of my most traumatic situations for at least 15 years. I've been out of it for at least 15 years. And with that, I still have ideations at the most inconvenient moments. And it's more of an intrusive thought for me now than it is a true ideation. But I understand where that can lend itself to wanting to control the environment and not tolerating any kind of stress, not tolerating distress of any kind. And especially for some people, that would tend towards controlling a relationship. For me, I'm the opposite on relationships. I would rather shove that relationship away than control it. But I know that that is another way that some people respond to their trauma. And their trauma is potentially very valid. If you have felt like this and you have felt like you needed to control somebody that way, I get it. I understand that that is not a healthy thing to do, and I understand that that is something you will need to actually go to therapy for, because you do have legitimate trauma, but that's not a legitimate way of engaging with other people because of it. And so if you do have these kinds of feelings, if this is something that you have felt like you need to do or you have done in the past, and whether it was intentional or not, seeking out therapy for the very legitimate harm that you've experienced that has led you to these perspectives is really important. That is something that you really should work on in terms of helping yourself, because you don't do that out of no reason. You do this because of trauma. You do this of things that have already happened to you. And it is now being passed on to other people because of how that you were never handed those coping mechanisms, right? You were never taught how to cope with those things. And so that is lashing out onto other people as a means of trying to stay safe. And I understand it, but it's something that we can't continue on. We got to break that cycle. So hopefully this has given some perspective. If you have any other questions at all, please feel free to ask. I know that these are difficult topics, but it is something that is very important to talk about.